Good Tuesday morning and welcome back to the John Frederick Show. Common sense for the Commonwealth. We're broadcasting from the nation's capital and blasting our way through Virginia. This is the voice of the Commonwealth. Great to have you with us today. Joining us now is the president of EndingSpending.com, Brian Baker. How are you, Brian?
Great, John. How are you all?
Great to have you on, and we're a little, I guess the word is chagrined today. We can't really figure out where Speaker John Boehner is coming from now. All of a sudden, he's saying that, well, maybe in the short term, the problem isn't the debt.
We do not have an immediate debt crisis, but we all know that we have one looming. And we have one looming because we have entitlement programs that are not sustainable in their current form. There are big differences. And the president's idea of compromise is just do it my way. And that's just not going to work.
Okay, so, Brian, we're spending $1 trillion annually over what we have. We've got a nearly $17 trillion total debt. This has been all the talk. It ties into all of the federal spending issues we've got now. I know that your organization is acutely dialed in on this particular issue, and now we've got the Speaker of the House saying, well, it really isn't an issue in the short term. What gives?
Well, I think this is a technical dispute, really. The Speaker has been very clear throughout his entire time as Speaker that we have a massive deficit problem, right? We're deficit spending over $1 trillion a year, and certainly the Speaker thinks the debt is too high, which is why he has tried to institute some of these reforms, and the House has passed budgets that would reduce the debt over the long term. But the term debt crisis, I think he was referring specifically to, for instance, we're not in a Greek-style debt crisis right now. I mean, technically the United States, because of the tax revenue we generate every month, can continue paying service on the debt. So we're not in an immediate debt crisis, but one is very in the near distant future if we don't get the debt under control. So it's kind of a technical, very small point, but the Speaker's leadership overall has been important, pushing folks forward like Paul Ryan, whose budget obviously would balance in 10 years.
Now, if you can, give our audience kind of a breadth of what ending spending is. I know you guys were very, very instrumental in the primary victory of Ted Cruz in Texas. You were also involved in the Scott Walker campaign in the Cheese State. What is the number, kind of the top two objectives, if you will, of ending spending?
Right. Well, first, it's to educate the American people about the dangers of our debt. And we are never going to change the policy in this country unless we bring in, strong, courageous fiscal conservatives. So really, it's twofold, right? It's educating folks, because when people get educated, they get mad. When they get mad, they'll make a change. And then number two, it's electing the right kind of leaders. So, and as you said, we were instrumental for Senator Cruz. For Governor Walker, we really tried to do our best in 2010 to help John Boehner and his folks take over the House because, we believe that they have the best way forward in terms of how you balance the budget.
Now, ending spending is a super PAC that came into being, I know, about 2010. Can you give our audience kind of walk us through the genesis of it?
Sure. So what ending spending is we have two organizations. So we're a hybrid, really. We have an advocacy group, which is a nonprofit tax-exempt group, and then we have a super PAC. And essentially, in 2009, the entrepreneur by the name of Joe Ricketts, who had founded TD Ameritrade and was a very successful American, he looked at what the Obama administration was doing with the stimulus. And he was really, truly horrified. He saw the list of pork projects and everything, and he said, that is the wrong way to go about fixing our economy. And so he came to Washington, and he met with Republicans and he met with Democrats, and they all sort of uniformly said to him, you will not be able to fix Congress until we get rid of the process of earmarking. So when our organization started in January 2010, we had one singular goal, and that was to get a ban on congressional earmarks, which a year later we were able to pass.
So what are the top priorities of ending spending now?
Well, there's a lot of courageous leaders in Congress who have fought to keep sequestration in place, for example, or who are fighting to pass a budget that balances in 10 years. And so we need to have their backs. I mean, you have to hold leaders accountable, as a lot of folks say, but you also have to be there to defend them when they do the right thing. These leaders who are fighting to balance the budget in 10 years or are fighting to repeal Obamacare, some of these other issues, are courageous leaders. And so that's the first and most important mission of our organization, is to defend the people with courage. But the second one is to send help their way. And it's not just a problem in Congress, right? It's also a problem at our state and local levels as well. So you talked about Scott Walker. Scott Walker is a prime example of who our organization supports, because he was a courageous leader who tried to get his state's fiscal house in order.
Right.
And in that regard, we think, Ken Cuccinelli is a Scott Walker type reformer who will really help to keep Virginia, and its economy in the leading part of the nation.
So what is your organization going to do, you think, beyond what they've done now in order to help the Attorney General become Virginia's next governor?
Well, if you look at our track record across all the elections we've been involved in, it's always first and foremost about public education. And what our super PAC does is we're not one of those super PACs who just bombards the airwaves with TV ads. That's
right.
Not the way we go about it. In fact, most of our ads are not negative at all. And we do a whole variety of education programs, from grassroots organizing, door knocking, a lot of internet education, any which way you can talk to voters where they are in their daily lives and try and relate the importance of the election.
Brian, in looking at Ending Spending's Facebook page as well, you do a tremendous amount of outreach through your social media, and one of the most recent posts you had indicated that for millennials, those coming up in the current generation, by the time they reach retirement age, the debt will be nearly 250% of the country's GDP. That is mind-boggling.
Right. It's the big joke. All these folks running around saying that Paul Ryan's budget, is draconian. And as Congressman Ryan said the other day on TV, I love this fact. This is a great fact, right? So important for people to understand. Under the Paul Ryan budget, we'll spend $41 trillion over the next 10 years. Under the current budget projected by the Obama administration, we'll spend $46 trillion. It's not like he's not like cutting a whole lot there, right? I mean, a lot of folks think he should cut deeper, but the significance is that Congressman Ryan's budget balances, and that will really help millennials to achieve their economic potential. I mean, what people don't understand, and what we need to do a better job of, and why we're working with leaders like Ken Cuccinelli and Pete Snyder and others to translate this to voters of all age groups, is that when the government takes in so much money, it crowds out private investment. It hurts economic growth. It decreases jobs. It's just it is not a surprise when you see how much the government has been spending in the Obama administration, and then you see the economic slowdown. It's cause and effect.
It is indeed, and it's funny. It goes to the old saying: a trillion here, a trillion there, and pretty soon you're talking about real money. I would also ask specifically, why did you endorse Pete Snyder, which is noted publicly on your Facebook page and on the website endingspending.com?
Absolutely proud to endorse him, and we've also contributed money to his campaign. I've discussed this with John before. I think the last time I was on the show, I told you all this. Pete Snyder is an innovative guy, and his social media company that he founded a number of years ago called New Media Strategies was a leader in how you reach out to people over the internet. And it's literally, I think he said it was like he took the first form of marketing, that is to say friend to friend, and took it online. And when we were going about this fight against earmarks, Mr. Ricketts said, this can't be the old way of doing it. Right, groups that existed for 10 or 15 years trying to fight earmarks, we'd heard about them every year, and everybody would get outraged for a day, and then it would go away. So Mr. Ricketts said, who can we bring in that can really help make this fight go viral? And that person was Pete Snyder. So we worked with Pete from the very early days of our organization. I remember meeting with him during Snow Armageddon, or whatever the last big snowstorm in D.C. was called, I think, years ago. And so we sat down, and it was all about A, translating the stories to the voter, and B, just making sure that we never let up. And, I guess the third point was creativity. And so Pete brought those ideas forward and worked with us, and so I saw him firsthand really fight this fight. and Mr. Ricketts did. And so it was just an easy decision to get in, and we always get involved behind candidates that have courage to fight. And we're not afraid to be involved in primary battles either.
Brian, as it goes to Attorney General Ken Cuccinelli in his race for the governorship, in order to attract voters away from Terry McAuliffe, does he have to rely on the old adage of running to the middle but governing from the right?
I think that that's an interesting proposition. I think that, Attorney General Cuccinelli's challenge and opportunity in this race is to keep relating to all voters about the dangers of government overreach. And so one of the reasons why we work with Attorney General Cuccinelli, for instance, we're not involved in every governor's race across the country, only the ones that we think are super important. Our organization, Ending Spending, took a very strong position on Obamacare, right? If you all recall, Obamacare was passed by one of the largest earmarks in history, the infamous Cornhusker kickback, followed closely by the shameful Louisiana Purchase. And so our brief to the courts, which I signed and submitted, were all about the shameful congressional process used to pass Obamacare. And so we worked hand in hand with Attorney General Cuccinelli. And so, I actually think that over the next year, when Americans and Virginians start to see the impact of Obamacare on their health care decisions and on their insurance premiums, they'll flock to Ken Cuccinelli's message. So he just has to get out there and explain how government overreach hurts Virginians, and then I think the election won't be that challenging for him.
And how does the organization weigh in on Governor McDonald's decision not to open up a state exchange and leave it in the hands of the feds as it goes to the Affordable Health Care Act?
Yeah, listen, I think Pete Snyder, said it best when he put out something a few weeks ago, and I think he said that there's no free money out there. And this notion of Medicaid expansion is such a joke. The government will pay for the first couple of years, and then after that, maybe it'll pay some percentage. That'll really be harmful to the states, and that's going to be a massive problem for the states that have gone along with it. So, I think anything we can do to limit the expansion of Obamacare and specifically Medicaid is a good idea. And so, I haven't seen that news on Governor McDonald, but if he's taken that approach, that's certainly a wise one.
Brian, just the other day, the Attorney General, Ken Cuccinelli, rejected signing the Grover Norquist anti-tax pledge. I happen to think that was a great decision and a step in the right direction for the Attorney General to broaden his appeal, especially to corporate Virginia. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of what Grover Norquist and Americans for Tax Reform has done with the pledge. They have helped, really, galvanize folks beyond this notion that we are taxed too much. So I have great respect for Grover Norquist. That being said, I think the pledge sometimes has more relevance for folks who are not necessarily as well known. And Ken Cuccinelli's bona fides are just, they're as strong as could be on the issues of fighting the growth of government. So I think, it probably made good sense for Attorney General Cuccinelli to take that action.
Brian, does...
or not take that action, I guess, John.
Right, exactly. Are we saddled with the idea of low-information voters on both sides not truly understanding what things like Grover's no-tax pledge actually mean, that it's not a pledge to him necessarily, but it's a pledge to the constituency of whatever area you're governing and so forth?
I think that in the macro sense, folks probably don't really understand that. But when you drill down to it and you actually take a look at the pledge, you see it's a pledge that you make to the voters and not to Grover. This notion of Grover being the most powerful man in Washington, I think, is untrue.
the mass puppeteer of the GOP, as MSNBC
right.
called him.
I love Grover, but I think that's always been just a real fallacy. I think what it should be is, and this is remarkable that we even have to say this in this day and age, is all Grover is asking folks to do is keep their word, right? I went to school at William & Mary, and we had the honor code, and your word is your bond. And so if you say you're not going to do something, that you ought not have to sign a piece of paper to prove it.
Well, I think the Attorney General did the right thing. He's got to give himself some flexibility to govern, and just as a general rule. I'm against all these kinds of pledges. I don't care what they are. I just think they're nonsense. But hey, Brian, we're almost out of time, but we do want to be sure that our listeners, if they want to get more information on ending spending, where do they go? What do they do?
You can go into our website, endingspending.com, and sign up. We do all kinds of email alerts, and we try to provide as much information as possible to folks. We came out with a book mid last year called The Fiscal Cliff. That term ended up becoming a real popular term, but folks who sign up can, I think, get a free e-copy of the book as well. So,
excellent.
For those who are interested.
And
Sounds
your
great.
Facebook page has over 7,000 likes. So,
Woohoo!
John, we've got about 6 times the path to go here. We appreciate the time, Brian, as always, and look forward to talking to you again as the news cycle warrants.
Thanks. You bet. Take care.